This is the CitizenLink Report.
If you find our insights helpful, would you support our video efforts? Your gift of $25 or more goes a long ways. Covers the crew, lights, cameras, all that. Just click on Donate. Thanks from all of us. Children are being hit with messages on TV, in school, and elsewhere that will lead them to ask questions about gender and gender confusion. We have some advice for moms and dads. This is the CitizenLink Report. I'm Stuart Shepard along with Candi Cushman, who's an education analyst for Focus on the Family. Hi, Candi.
Hi, Stuart.
Let's talk about this. It's a difficult subject, but children are being hit everywhere in the culture now. There's hardly a safe place that they can go to get away from these messages that deal with gender confusion, that deal with relationships in a way that's not God's timeless design for relationships, and eventually it's going to lead them to ask moms and dads some tough questions. You have some good advice for them. First, talk about what they're seeing, and then we'll talk about the advice in a bit.
Well, what you're saying is exactly right. I mean, even if they're not in a public school necessarily, it's likely they're going to encounter these things from something flipping through the television or just hearing something from their friends. And I think one thing that illustrates that well is this Time magazine cover that came out earlier this summer, in which it talked about that transgender issues are a tipping point in our culture right now. The next civil rights movement is what they called it. But I think that tipping point word is really a good description because it's seeping into our schools. Not only is it in the culture, but coming into our schools. And we've now moved way beyond, this clash in cultural values concerning things like same-sex marriage and homosexuality. Now we're going into this area of transgender topics, of familiarizing very young children with cross-dressing, the whole idea that they can choose their gender. Being male and female isn't something God created, God gave us. It's something that society just made up. And we can choose what we want to be or something in between, gender, queer, what have you. So these are the kind of messages that are coming into our children.
Now, when these questions come up, how can a mom or dad talk to their children about this topic in a way that will help them navigate through this tricky terrain?
Well, I think one easy place to start, especially when you're dealing with younger kids, is just explaining that we do often encounter messages that conflict with what God's Word says, or messages that are confusing, but those messages do not in any way change what the Bible says about God's clear design for us. And then just talking to them, about Genesis 1:27, where it talks about God loved us enough to create us, to actually design us, that He created us male and female. And that is a blessing. It's a gift from God, a blessing. And so I think if anytime we can give our children messages affirming their masculinity or their femininity, I'm so proud that you are my son. I'm so glad that God gave me the gift of you being my daughter. That's a good way to just build up their confidence in that area, to welcome them into what it means to be a male or female.
Yeah.
But then also just giving them examples in everyday life about God's design. And we could get more into that if you want.
Yeah, let's do it, because what you're talking about here, first of all, is understanding what that design is, and then affirming that in the lives of our kids. And what are some real-life examples that we can show of that?
Well, of course, with young children, just starting with their bodies and just pointing out that God designed us, physically designed us to be a male or a female, and that's a good thing and a blessing. It's something to be celebrated. But then just using examples from everyday life, like if you're watching an ice skating competitive performance and there's a man and a woman performing, talking about, look, they're doing the same athletic moves, but they're mirroring each other, and they both bring something unique to those same performances, to the same athletic moves, but they're both unique and they're both special and different. And it's a great illustration of how God made us as male and female to be a beautiful union, to be complementary and each bring something unique, but it's a union.
Now, part of this in culture as well, so we've given our kids examples of God's design. We've talked to them and affirmed them of who they are. We also need to help them to deal with people who disagree, who take a different point of view on this with compassion and respect. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, because we all know we're seeing more and more of these cases across the nation where even at the elementary school level, all the way up to high school, of course college, where let's say a student that was born as a boy decides that his true identity is a girl, so he comes to the school, he's given permission to use the girls' restrooms, the girls' locker rooms. Now parents are concerned about their children's physical privacy, and maybe if it's a younger child, they're asking you as a parent, well, I encountered the student at recess, I'm confused. So I think, again, starting with the younger children, we can talk to them about sometimes people feel confused about how God made them. It's painful, they feel confused about who they are. And we want to understand we want them to understand that can be a very painful place for the child. And so we need to be kind to that child. We need to treat them just as we would any other child. And of course, so teasing, any kind of bullying is always wrong. So making that clear to your child. But then at the same time, affirming that they do have healthy boundaries at school that are protected, that they can go to you for help, as a parent, or go to their school official. And so that means if they're in a situation where they're undressing in front of someone else and they don't feel safe or private, it's okay to talk to someone and explain that they don't feel safe or private. They don't want to do that. They don't have to go in the same bathroom where they don't feel safe or private. So just talking through that with your child. I think then also at the older level, just maybe you can explain a little more about the developmental part of it. Talking to them about how it would feel so hard, so painful to feel like almost that you feel a rejection of yourself, even maybe sometimes hatred of yourself. And maybe one way to explain this in a way that doesn't, of course, address the whole complexity of the issue, but helps them to have a compassionate mindset.
We have to use analogies.
Yeah, is if, let's say, have you ever tried to work on a homework assignment or master a skill in a sport, and you just feel like you're not quite reaching it, you're not getting to where you want, and you just feel this frustration, maybe hurt, maybe even anger. Because developmentally, people run into challenges about understanding who they are as a male or female. There's different obstacles, different complications in their life that we don't know about. Yeah. So helping your child understand that this principle of everyone is created by God, regardless of what they're struggling with, whether we agree with them or not, and what they believe or how they're behaving, they are created by God. They have innate dignity and worth. And so Christian students should really be the first to stand up against bullying. So it's just, Christian families and students need a lot of prayer to address this with wisdom and grace and strength.
And to be clear, it's an analogy. We're not saying those are the same things, but it's to help understand what someone else might be experiencing with that. Now, some will say, boy, I'm glad this is not happening at my school. It always seems to be happening at some other school, I think, probably. Perhaps. Yeah. and they're wondering, how do I know whether this is happening at the school that my kids are going to, particularly public school?
Right. Well, I suggest that parents just spend a few hours at the beginning of every school year, or even, in the middle of it, just take a look at your school website. That's the easiest place to start. Just spend a couple of hours. You'll find where most schools have curriculum and instruction listed in their department listings. They've got school board minutes. You can just do a really easy word search and look for topics like gender identity, gender roles and diversity, family diversity, and now, of course, tolerance and safe schools programs and anti-bullying. Right. Not that those are all bad, but a lot of times that is how these topics are coming in, and that can be concerning because when they're not categorized in sex education, well, then parents aren't notified about it a lot of times. Yeah. So if you see those topics coming up, don't be afraid or intimidated from asking questions, going to your school and asking what's being taught. Can I see the lesson plans? The school library, the online library catalog is also a great place to start and just do some word searches. And you have some resources that you've put together to help parents to work through this conversation, both with their kids and perhaps also with school officials. That's right. At truetolerance.org, we've got a great kit. It's a primer for parents on how to respond in a truth and grace way to the gender confusing messages that are coming in through our schools and our culture. It gives parents great points like we're talking about with the ice skating example and different ways to talk to their children, as well as legal resources for protecting your child's physical privacy. And then of course we've got the checklist for what to look for in your school for concerning sexuality topics and what to do about it if you do see things of concern. And we'll put a link in the summary that goes along with this video and the text that you can click on to get to those resources, but the website basically is? Yeah, truetolerance.org. All right. Candi, thanks for your insights. Thanks for following this. Very helpful. Thank you, Stuart. And thank you for watching. You may always write to us at mail@citizenlink.com.
We're interested in your questions, your comments, your criticisms. Remember to pray for students around the country as school is coming back into session here. Pray that they would have the kind of wisdom that Candi was just talking about presented in their lives, either through a mom or a dad or an aunt, uncle, or grandparent, or through someone at the church to help them understand this difficult issue. And remember, stand tall and be heard.